My name is Jason, and this is Just Watches. Today we have a watch on loan for review from Ginault. Now I've heard great things about this brand, so my expectations were very high. However, this watch actually exceeded my already high expectations. However, before we get to the review, if you're enjoying the contents of this channel, I invite you to subscribe. And if you're enjoying the contents of this individual video, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you so much. For price and availability, at the time of this recording, this watch is currently available in a number of configurations. The full retail price starts at $14.99. However, this watch is currently available for $1,039. The case is 41mm in diameter, 47mm lug to lug, but the solid end links do extend that lug to lug distance to 50.5mm. It's 12mm thick and then has a 20mm lug width opening. Now, the shape of this case probably looks familiar. It's very similar to another watch you may have heard of, sans the crown guards. Now, the case is brushed on top with a nice high polished chamfer all along the top of the mid case, and then that transitions to high polished sides. Now, the case is almost completely flat, but it's still comfortable on my 6 3/4 inch wrist due to the short lug to lug distance. While the end links do add to that distance, they angle down from the case and flow nicely into the bracelet. The stock bracelet starts at 20mm before tapering down to 16mm. I really prefer bracelets that do a full 4mm taper rather than the 2mm that is much more common. The bracelet articulates really well against the back of the watch, as well as between the links, two factors that add to a bracelet's overall comfort. The 3-link style is nicely brushed on top and high polish on the sides. The dramatic taper of the bracelet is preserved by the sleek clasp, which is only 17.5mm thick. The unbranded clasp uses a safety catch and a friction fit. Now, I generally prefer a double push deployant style clasp, but the action on this one is so crisp and tactile that it's an absolute pleasure to use. The scissor is fully milled, and this clasp also has an on-the-fly adjustment system that's extremely easy to activate and provides a substantial amount of adjustment. I would say close to 17mm. Finally, sizing is accomplished with screw lengths, and the screws are quite large, which makes them much easier to work with. There is also an included screwdriver to assist in sizing. I wish more brands would use these larger style screws when they use screw links. This watch is powered by the Sellita SW201 Elaboré grade, which has been meticulously regulated and tested in-house over a 6-week process. Now, this is a hacking, hand-winding 28,800 vibration per hour movement with a power reserve of 38 hours and a stated accuracy of plus or minus 7 seconds a day. However, as you can see, this one is running basically perfect, about 0 seconds to -1 seconds in the dial up position with very healthy amplitude and 0 beat error. And then it's running about the same with the crown up, between 0 and -1 seconds a day. Again, no beat error. So based on this, these are very meticulously regulated movements. The 7mm screw down crown has super chunky knurling and is nicely signed with the Ginault logo. The threading and unthreading action is buttery smooth, and the watch is very easy to operate with this large crown. One small note is there is a ghost position where you would adjust the date, despite this watch not displaying a date. However, all the mechanics have been removed, so you won't actually feel anything if you turn the crown in that first click out. The flat sapphire crystal sits about 1mm proud of the bezel and has a nice facet all the way around the edge. The crystal also has a very good application of anti-reflective coating. The 120-click unidirectional bezel has a nice chunky grip that matches the crown. The finishing alternates between brushing and polishing, which makes this bezel look absolutely fantastic and dynamic in the light. The bezel action is some of the best I have ever experienced, with an incredibly consistent and deeply pleasing click. It settles back ever so slightly, but the alignment at 12 is perfect. The insert is sapphire, fully lumed, and looks excellent overall on this watch. The matte black dial can appear inky black in some lighting conditions. There is no chapter ring, but a sloped rehaut frames the dial and adds a lot of depth. There are dashes for the minutes with the Ginault logo, Ginault, and kinetic continuous, which is a cute way of saying automatic. At 6, we have silent service in red, the depth rating, submersible maritime, and precision chronometer, which is a cute way of saying this watch is very accurate, and you could dive with it. Now, this is a substantial amount of text on the dial, and that's something I prefer, but I think it's another element of homage overall. The indices are applied and filled with lume. While the applied indices are quite simple, the quality and finishing on them is exceptionally high. I don't think it translates through the camera that well, but in person, they just look 4K. Overall, the dial is super legible and well executed. The sword style hour and minute hands have a gentle curve to them. I've actually never seen this before, but it has a similar effect as when a hand is gabled in that they will catch light from even more angles than a flat hand. Again, as with the indices, the hands are super well finished in high polish and then filled with lume. The broad hour hand is easily distinguished from the long minute hand that reaches out to the very edge of the dial. The second hand is red with a counterbalance and a lumed lollipop towards the tip. I love the use of the red second hand, which in combination with silent service on the dial adds just a bit of color to this otherwise monochromatic watch. Well, you don't see this often, but I believe the lume on the Ginault is brighter and then definitely lasts longer than the Seiko on the right. Doesn't really get better than that for lume. And here is the watch on my 6 3/4 inch wrist at 41mm diameter, 47mm lug to lug. It's going to look great on a large variety of wrist sizes. Pros and cons, starting with the pros. Well, the overall quality of this watch dominates what I've experienced from this price point. Whereas Steinhardt is the king of the sub $500 diver, I feel like this Ginault is the king of the $1,500 range. This watch feels much nicer overall than both my Christopher Ward and modern Seiko diver that fall into this similar price range, especially considering that this watch is currently listed for $1,039. Second, the quick adjust on the clasp is such a pleasure to use. It's also nicer than any other quick adjust system I have used before. Finally, the bezel action is wonderful and the bezel is a joy to operate. As for cons, well, it's undeniable that this watch is a blended homage of a few very famous watches. I know some people don't like homages, but I don't really have a problem with them. Second, there is just a touch of rotor noise on this watch. I don't really mind it, but I was a little surprised to hear it. Finally, I tend to dislike flat cases like this as they have a tendency to wear cocked on my 6 3/4 inch wrist. If your wrist is larger than mine, you probably won't have this issue. As for comparables, at the current special price, you could get something like the Christopher Ward C60, but I have the C60 Sapphire and I do think the Ginault is a nicer option at that price point. For full MSRP, you could put it against the Christopher Ward C60 Elite, which is a titanium version of the C60 and has a chronometer movement. You could also consider things like an ETA-powered Oris Aquis, or perhaps something like the Rado Captain Cook. Now, I've only briefly handled the Rado and the Oris Aquis, but I dare say the Ginault is nicer than both of those. So there you have it, the Ginault Silent Service. What do you think about this watch? Let me know in the comment section below. As always, if you're enjoying the content of this channel, I invite you to subscribe. And if you're enjoying the contents of this individual video, please give it a thumbs up. That's all for this time. My name is Jason, and you have been watching Just Watches.